Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. This is our March event. This is a Roma users group, and it is a group of data scientists, researchers, and students who aim at improving their skills, mostly in R, but not only that. Meet the host. So me, hello, my name is Federica Gazzelloni, and a bit of my background. I am an actuary and a statistician. I'm passionate about all things data science, building reproducible research workflow, using R and other modern tools such as AI and all variants. So I am the organizer not only of this chapter, so Roma users, but even of Our Ladies Rome. We do lots of stuff with Our Ladies Rome. We have a YouTube channel as well as many other social and things. So you are pleased to join us and give us a like, a follow. That will help us a lot. If you'd like to know a bit more about my ongoing projects, here is my website. And so you find many things about that. So what are we doing? So we are building a professional art community. We are part of a larger group. We are sponsored by the Art Consortium and the Linux Foundation. And we like to meet other people who share our interests, and in particular in Rome. But not only that, because then it turns out that we have a very nice international community. So why Rome is part of this larger art community? Because we organize coding discussions, implementation, networking, and on top of all this, we provide free of charge advanced tutorials, applied workshops, and opportunities to connect academia with industry. So if you like to have a look at our website, romausersgroup.github.io, you find the latest news about R and the latest news about our events. So what to expect? Networking events, engage with professionals, share experiences, online speakers, join insightful sessions with experts sharing the latest trends in R and data science. If you like to get involved, contribute, and connect, you are very welcome. The next speakers that are upcoming on April and May are Marvin Ayari and Alejandro Abraham. So they both will be talking about how to use R for for particular real world case studies, and that would be very interesting. More info soon. This QR code is our website, as I already said, and so you are pleased to connect with us. You help us a lot, and give us a like and stay with us for further information. So without further ado, I present Joseph Barbier. Thank you very much for joining us. I met him on LinkedIn, and just, I saw that he was very active within the data science community. And I said, why don't we try invite him? So he might have some interesting stuff to tell us. So he exactly had a little of time to share with us his work. He is Joseph Barbier. And it's like data wizard behind the yellow sunflower company. You can find website here, whysunflower.com. As a data consultant, he is on a mission to turn complex data workflows into breezy, reproducible masterpieces that are as clear as a sunny day. So, from analysis to reporting, he makes it all a walk in the park. Plus, he's a brain behind several open source data visualization packages that make your charts sing. So, without further ado, let's pass the word to Joseph Barrier. Less iteration, better charts. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. So let me share my screen. Yeah, this one should work. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So hi everyone. I'm super happy to be here to talk about data visualization. In particular, I'm going to talk about how and why we should do less iterations when we create charts, and how and why it matters. Basically, we are doing things all wrong, but it's normal to iterate when we make charts. Like even the best data visualization specialists in the world, they never make a great chart right from the beginning. They always make many iterations, probably dozens of iterations at least. So it's very normal to do many iterations. And AI has made this much even important, like because we can now code even faster, so we can very quickly make even more iteration and make faster iterations. But that doesn't mean we are making better charts in general, because we can make an infinite number of iterations. What matters at the end of the day is the actual chart that we are making. So maybe we should try to do something different, and we should do things differently, is where code is the very last thing that we do when making charts. Instead of being one of the first one, it should be actually the last one, and we should focus on designing first. The default workflow that for many people, and myself included, at least for a very long time, is basically you have some data and you start exploring it, and then you make a first chart. This might not necessarily be a bad idea, but once you have a first chart, you realize, okay, this might not be the best chart. Maybe I need to do a different kind of chart. So you change the chart type. And then you're like, yeah, the default colors are definitely not the best one. So let's tweak them. Let's choose something a bit better looking. Then you update the labels because they're not very easy to understand. And then you update the scales because once again, they're not the best one. So yeah, you adapt them. And then you realize, oh, maybe I need to change this and that. And at the end, you realize, oh, maybe actually I should go back to the first that I've started working on. And then everything happened again and again. So, and this feels very natural because once you have your thing in front of you, you're like, yeah, I can just ask AI to do something, make a first destination. It will not take that much time, so I can quickly see things. So yeah, why not just start with asking AI to do something? And it feels pretty good because we have an immediate feedback loop. Basically, it is very visual, very quickly. We have something in front of you that we've created. So it feels pretty good. It feels productive, once again, because we have already done something. But actually, that does not mean that what we're doing is actually productive, because when we're making charts, our goal is to be useful, not just to make charts, just to make charts. So instead, we want to start doing things differently. The first question you want to ask yourself is why does this chart need to exist in the first place? And more generally, more specifically, what you want to ask yourself is who is this chart for? For example, if your chart is for technical people or for not technical people, you will probably do things very differently. If your chart is meant to be used by HR, marketing people, product people, whatever, you will do things very differently compared to making a chart for your other data scientist colleagues, for example, other researchers, those kind of people. So you need to really think about this because it will probably significantly change how the chart will look like. Then you should ask yourself, what's the point of this chart? What's the message? What's the main or one or 2 points that I want to highlight in this specific chart? What should people get from this chart? by really looking at this chart, by trying to understand it. And then what is the impact of this chart? Like what people should do after seeing that? Like is it just purely informative? But often it's just to hide the fact that maybe it's unclear what people should do with that data, what matters. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much it. So instead, what we want to do is what I call design before code. That will be first focus on design and then coding. Quick presentation that we did before, but basically my name is Joseph. I'm working on data science fields, mostly data visualization. I'm doing some consulting at Yellow Sunflower that Federica mentioned right before. You can find my website and the website of my company right here. So let's take an example. This is a very simple data set. Let's assume we are working for a company that sell a single product. The price of this product is around $100 on average. And each week we make a few units sold and we make some sales, which is the amount of money we made. And for the context, the company we work for increased its price a few months ago. They went from around $100 on average to 115. And management want to know what the impact of that change, like was it a good or bad idea? And we have data for that, so that's pretty cool. And then we need to ask ourselves, what should we do? And what I want to do intuitively, and what probably most people all will is let's make a first chart. Like I mean, the data is very simple. Let's make a quick chart. Let's look at how the data looks like. So let's start by looking how much units we sold. We can see that around a few months ago, the number of sales, the number of units sold we made has drastically decreased. Okay, so that's the first interesting thing to have in mind. Okay, now let's look at sales. Okay, now we can see that we have significantly increased compared to units sold. So that's interesting. Maybe let's try to compare those two charts to see what we can find out. So we put them on the first chart, on the same chart, and then we realize, oh, actually this looks kind of weird. And you start to think about it, and then you realize, oh, okay, I know why. It's because the number of units sold is in hundreds, like around 300 on average, while sales is more on dozens of thousands. So it wouldn't make sense to put them on the same chart. So it's like, okay, I need to change my chart. Actually, this is not a good one. So let's put them next to each other and you're like, okay, this looks better. And if you look closely, you might realize that the Y scales are very tight, which means that the increase and the decrease are kind of intensified, like they look higher than they look bigger than they actually are. So maybe we need to zoom out a little bit to make sure our chart are not too confusing. So now we zoom out and we can see that actually it's much easier to read, but most of the data is completely useless. Like if we are interested in looking at what happened a few months ago when the company changed its price, maybe we need to filter the data because what happened 2 years ago does not matter that much. The only things that we are interested in are the top right area of the chart. So let's filter our data. And now we have a better chart that is easier to understand, but the trend isn't really obvious. You're like, yeah, that doesn't meet. You feel like you're seeing some different data, but actually it's the exact same one. So yeah, maybe this chart isn't as relevant as you thought. And like, okay, finally, instead I change my mind, I actually want to put them on the same chart. And one way on doing so is by using a dual axis. So on the left we have the y-axis for the units sold, and on the right for the sales. And when you look at this, you're like, okay, this chart looks very good. It's very easy to understand. We have everything on a single chart. But then you remember that you saw a few months ago that apparently dual axis line charts are often a bad idea. So, and to illustrate this point, I want to show you an example. So let's look at 5 different scenarios. The first one is, I mean, on 5 scenarios, it will be the exact same data. The only thing that will change is the Y scales on both left and right. So we have the world GDP and the French GDP. On this first chart, we can see that the French GDP is higher than world GDP, which, when you think about it, is kind of weird. How come a single country can have a higher GDP than the world GDP? Okay, this is a first red flag on why this chart might be wrong. Now let's look at scenario 2. Okay, this one is a bit weird because how come now we have the world GDP that is higher than French GDP, even if that's the exact same data? It's just because we've manipulated the scales. Now let's look at another scenario, and now there are more or less the same, and they have a crossing point around 2011 when France become lower in GDP than the world, which once again doesn't make any sense because those kind of charts, that's not how you're supposed to read those kind of charts, but that's what humans want to do right away because we see two charts next to each other, we want to compare them. Now let's look at another scenario. Now they are more or less highly correlated, which once again, when you think about all the other charts we saw before, it's like how come we can put them almost as this close? And once again, another scenario where France GDP is higher than world GDP. My main point here is to show you that you probably should never do dual axis chart. So even if before we were like, okay, this chart may be a solution to what we're trying to do, but even if it looks good, that doesn't mean it's a good chart. I've put a few references that talk about this topic in more detail with examples that you can play with. And to give you an idea, I made this chart in ggplot, but it's a single type of chart you can make with ggplot with a dual axis. Like you don't have full control over when you have two y axis, y scale, you don't have full control over exactly what they are supposed to be. And the main reason for that is that the developers of ggplot refuse to implement that feature because it's such a bad chart that they decide that they don't want to allow user to even create their kind of chart. So you can make very simple example like this, where to give you more details, like both scale have to have a relationship between them, a linear or monotonic relationship between them, which is kind of confusing. But basically what you have to keep in mind, this chart is pretty much a bad idea. So now, how can we compare the chart if we are not allowed to do anything and most charts are not very satisfying? And there is this quote from Jurassic Park that I really like. That is, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. And the main point of that is instead of doing something, you should start by asking yourself, do I even need to do it in the first place? And maybe we don't need to compare units and sales because units are just how much units we sold, but sales is how much money the company made, and that's probably what management and other people in the company will be interested in. So let's take our very simple line chart from before where we show sales evolution, so concretely how much money the company made. It looks pretty bad, but let's make it better. First, we change the theme. Let's add, for example, the theme minimal from ggplot. That is pretty good. Then we remove both the X and the Y labels. We change the tick labels by something a bit more human readable. We increase the size to be, once again, to make it easier to read. We highlight the area where the company changed its price, mostly to make it even more obvious to know when the price actually changed. We remove some grid in the background that are not really useful. And the last step is to move on the right the white tick labels, because since most of the interesting part of the chart is on the right, let's just put everything on the right. It will make things even easier to read. Okay, so our chart is definitely not perfect, not beautiful, but it kind of does the job more or less. And you're still working on the chart, and now you have your colleagues that come and say, hey, I think we should still focus on showing how much we need sold because that might matter to marketing people. And apparently management wants a bar plot. So that means that everything we've done so far is probably useless. And maybe we need to just start over because that's what not the people that we use the charts are interested in. But okay, I mean, that's the work. If they want a bar plot, then let's just do a bar plot. But the issue with that is that we might find ourselves in the exact same situation that we've started with. Like maybe we'll spend a day or two working on a bar plot, trying to make it look good looking, interesting, relevant, and they will probably just change our mind to finally we want to do something else. So let's try by doing things differently. First thing we do is we delete everything, the entire code we've written before. As you'll see, it will not be as useful. I think it feels weird at first, but trust me, you don't need that code. So let's just delete everything. Then we define the goal. And until we have a precise goal of what are we trying to do with that chart, we don't go to the next step. So we need to spend some time defining the goal. Once we know exactly what's the point of the chart, let's work on some design. Once we have a basic design, we ask for feedback. Feedback will be asked for other colleagues, management, and pretty much all people that will use, consume, or work on the chart. Okay, so let's start by defining the goal. Basically, we are interested in trying to understand what is the impact of the recent price change on the product of the company's product. We want to know how much units sold, are we selling fewer units, and by how much, like is it a lot or not? And we want to know sales, are our sales higher or lower, and by how much? Once we have a good design, a good goal, here in this case, it's pretty simple. You have to imagine that in more realistic world, it will be more complex, more nuanced, but let's keep it simple for here. Okay, now we know what we want to do, and we need to think of how we could represent those information like units sold change, sales change, and by how much it change. Working on design is actually much more complex than it looks like, and it's a real skill in itself. Some people are just doing design for data visualizations because it's so complex. So you really just need to take your time. Like you don't have to do it fast. In terms of tools, there are many that exist. You can use Figma, Canva, Excalibur, which is what I personally use, but it's just a personal preference because it's free and open source and it works well for my use case. And you can obviously use pen and paper. That's what I used to do. So, and it's actually often a good thing because you can iterate very, very fast when designing because we are just so fast at using a pen and paper compared to using a web app or something like that. But the only thing to keep in mind here in terms of tooling is that it actually doesn't matter. Use whatever you prefer, whatever you feel comfortable with, and it will probably do everything you need. It might be relevant to use similar tools to your colleagues, especially if they have like collaboration features that might be interesting or relevant. But outside of this, honestly, just use whatever you prefer and whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, so now let's work on some design. So when I was working on those slides, I was actually doing the exercise I'm showing you. Like, okay, I need to work on some design. I know management wants a bar plot, and I want to highlight a change. So once I know that, okay, I can make a very basic sketch in Excalibur, which is what I used here. And it's definitely not the best chart, probably not what we will end up doing in code at the end, but it's a very first prototype that is already very useful because it took me very few time. Once I knew the goal, I could just make a very basic example. I can ask for feedback, which is what matters the most. I can send it to my colleague and to management and ask them, hey, what do you think of this? Does that represent what you had in mind or do you want something else? And it took me much, much less time compared to coding this specific chart, especially when I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. Once I have my feedback and check, I can just iterate, make a new iteration, change the design, and so on. So now that we have a good design or something that we are happy with, but we have 0 lines of code, maybe we've spent a few days working on this, and you might not feel very productive because you're like, I haven't made anything concrete yet. Like I don't have a single line of code, I have nothing working, I'm not even using the real data, everything is just on paper, but I have anything concrete. But it doesn't matter that much because we did the hardest part by far. Like once you have a clear goal and a good design that people are happy with, then you definitely are just going to do simple things now. Because as I said before, designing is kind of hard and it takes a lot of time, but if you ask for feedback, it will get faster. Okay, now we have a design, everybody is happy, we can start coding. If you use AI, it will drastically change how you will make your chart because I assume many people you are now using AI to code. AI is pretty good at ggplot in general. So instead of asking AI, hey, I have this data, I want you to show me like show sales evolution using ggplot, and it will probably give you some working code, but I'm pretty confident that the chart will be kind of ugly and not really relevant. Instead, you just have to describe with words the design that you made before. Hey, I want a bar plot for this specific period. I want to highlight this specific event at this specific date. I want to remove this element. I want to compare this and that. So you can have a much, much better prompt because you know exactly what you want, and AI will also much more easily understand what you're trying to do, what's your goal, and maybe have optionally some good suggestions. If you don't use AI, maybe some people are. it's honestly much easier too, because if you already know ggplot well, once again, this will be very fast to code because you know exactly what you want to do. So once again, it will be just faster. And if you're not an expert in coding and don't want to use AI, even looking on internet and Google, it will be much easier to look for how to remove grid on this axis. You will have much more precise Google search in general, and it will make things much easier for you to code and create the chart. So let's summarize the framework in general. Basically, you start by defining the intent. You should ask yourself, who is supposed to use that chart at the end of the day? What are they supposed to do with it? And why it should matter for them? And this might feel like easy, but actually you need to really spend some time. Like maybe it's people that are very different that are supposed to look at the chart. Maybe it's a very specific kind of people like HR or head of HR, like very specific kind of people. So you need to really think about this, and it will probably change how you make your charts at the end. Then you need to work on the design. A good rule of thumb when designing a chart is if you're not able to see the chart visually, either in your head or inside some design tool, it's probably not time to code. Basically, you should be able to know exactly what you want to code before coding. If you don't know what you're trying to code, it's probably a bad idea. You probably should spend some time thinking about design and the goal. As for feedback, this is one of the most important part because you probably don't know what you don't know. And for example, when you're making a chart, especially for non-technical people, you don't know what they will understand from your chart. So you need to, even people that are less good at you at using data, they probably will have very important feedback because they will say, hey, I don't understand this, or what this is supposed to mean, that kind of thing. So definitely ask for feedback, and obviously feedback from other colleagues too that know the data. Then once we have everything, that everybody is happy, we know the design, we know what's the point of the chart, then we can start coding, and you'll see that this part is actually the easiest one when everything else is defined. It's the fastest one now, especially with AI. There are some cases where it's okay to code first. The most important one is to get an overview of the data. For example, if you do the Tidy Tuesday challenge or similar things, or even inside the company or for a research project, uh, it's very often the chart that you will make will depend on what is the values inside the data. Like for example, if we take the same example that we used here, um, how do I say this? If the price change has no impact on sales and units sold, we will probably do a different kind of chart, or maybe we will not make a chart at all. Maybe it does not matter to make a chart. So the chart that we make, what we will explain to management and similar, will depend on the values inside the data. And for this, you need to see it at some point. So you kind of have to make a chart anyway to kind of see it. And AI can be very useful here. What I personally do very often is, for example, if I do the Tidy Tuesday challenge, is just send AI to the AI the data and say, hey, make me 5 to 10 charts showing most patterns. I just want to see a quick overview, very ugly charts. I probably use none of the code at the end of the day. But it's just for me to get an idea of what's going on inside the data, and then I can make some decision on the design, the intent, all those things. And obviously, another case where this might be relevant to code first is when the design is already defined, especially by something else. Like as I said before, sometimes it's just somebody else who work on design, and you're just asked to implement the design. So in this case, you can start by coding, obviously. It might also make sense to challenge the design. It's not because it's not your job to design it that you don't have thought to share and things that could be better. Uh, so thanks everyone for listening. If I said things wrong or relevant or that you find interesting, I would be very happy to chat with you. So feel free to send me a message. You can mostly find me on LinkedIn. You can find here my email and the slide of this talk. You can find them on this specific GitHub repository.
Thank you very much. That was great. Thank you very much. So we learned a lot of things. You can put questions in the chat and you already presented very nicely because you said if you do it with ggplot, you have a little exploration, then have a feedback, then draw your um, vision, your design, and then when you finally have finalized what the output would be, you start coding, querying AI, etc. But I'm interested on the very early stages, such as I would get directly to AI, to be honest. Even if I'm curious about data, so I would like check the data. What type of data do you usually deal with?
Mm, Honestly, it's kind of what we call tabular data, which mostly like Excel, CSV kind of shit. I mean, I'm not working, for example, with text data or image data, which would probably change things a lot, but I'm not particularly expert in those topics. But yeah, I mean, very often it's very, I mean, it honestly depends on the goal. Like, if you're doing the tidy Tuesday challenge, as I say, it's the perfect use case to just ask AI, like, hey, make me a few charts. Like, I want to just see the data, what's going on. Like, it probably wouldn't make sense to spend some time like seeking too much about what I want to do instead, while you'd have no idea what's inside the data. My point is more to where, for at least from my experience, when I'm working for a client and they have a few charts inside the report, and we are discussing what should the chart look like, what do we want to highlight. We ended up spending so much time just coding and making change on the coding side because the design isn't very clear. While what we could have done instead is just start by working on the design, and once everyone is happy with the design and we believe, okay, this is what we want to highlight inside the report, then I can start coding. But it can feel frustrating at first because like once the design is done, you have basically done nothing. Like you have zero line of code, and it might feel a bit weird at first. But in terms of time you spend on for more or less complex projects, on my experience, it drastically reduces how many iterations we need to do when we start by focusing, okay, what we want to do, and then once everyone is happy, we can start coding.
Yeah, exactly. And do you have a favorite AI tool to use?
Honestly, not necessarily. And also, since it's probably change every 3 months, like the whole AI thing is changing, like there is a new AI or whatever. So I'm not sure if what I say now will stay relevant like in 6 months from now. But honestly, I use ChatGPT when I want something specific or not, or if I want something more about like purely exploration, probably some codec or Cloud Call tool because I can make more iteration faster indirectly inside my computer. But yeah, I think I haven't tried everything yet, so there might be some better options.
Right. So the like the workflow changed a bit.
Yeah,
The AI advent. Yeah. So there's pro and contro,
yeah, exactly.
those things. Um, okay. I'm not sure if there's any question you would like to ask yourself, anyone in the crowd, if they want to ask questions. How one question that come up to on top of my mind is how long it will take for you to release a design after
Mm,
your data has been provided.
mm, I would say it depends on how complex is the data, but for example, I often work with data that is just some time series, like something evolving, like a quantity evolving for that, which is probably one of the simplest kind of data because it's fairly easy to understand. I would say I will make a first version in, yeah, I don't know. If I have some great idea, maybe 1 hour to 2 or 3, and then this is just the first version that I'm sending to my clients, and then I will say, oh yeah, we like this, we don't like that, we want to change this, this is not clear for us. Then I will make another iterations, and often it's spread around a few days or weeks, so it's hard to measure exactly how much I spent. But often it's like the first iteration is, yeah, probably the most important one because you make 2 or 3 different versions of the same chart, and then you make many iterations, but most of them are just small tweaks like, hey, we need to change this color to be closer to our brand, that kind of thing. So all of them are just very small tweaks. But yeah, it can take a lot of time, and unfortunately, sometimes like even when once everyone's happy with the design and I've started implementing it, they decide to change the design to something with of it. And so that's another issue that it's hard to deal with, but I don't think there are many ways to fix that. It's just part of how the business work.
What is your background?
Uh, so I've studied economics and math at university. I mean, math and data science. Mostly, I have a master's degree in applied mathematics. And then after college, I started freelancing. I was already freelancing during college, all around small data visualization stuff, but there was no design included. It was just like reproducing some very specific chart, like writing some tutorials on how to do data visualization. So it wasn't very creative, but that's why I started data visualizations, and then I've started more consulting, more data in general, not specifically data visualization.
We have Mona. I don't know if I would pronounce it right. With a question.
Hello, Joseph. Hello, Federica.
Hello.
Hello.
Much for organizing this talk. It was very informative, and I really like the approach, Joseph. Thank you very much for this. I am a bioinformatician, so I work with R to study biological data, medical data. And at the end of the day, I actually also work in research in academia. At the end of the day, what we do is we publish papers in journals, and during papers, data visualization is everything. Like you work for 1 year on experiments, and then you want to summarize all your work in visualization. So I wanted to ask you for your feedback about a couple of things. Like, for example, in our field, how do you approach multi-message or layered narratives in a single visualization? Like, if I want to adopt the design first, I really find it's hard sometimes if I have like multi-message or layered narrative, how to depict this in a proper visualization. This kind of approach is really hard for me. I wanted your feedback about this, if it's possible.
Yeah, that's a very good question actually, and it's a very common problem actually that once you want to say you have so many things to say about what you're working on, especially it's been like a year working on a topic, you have many things to say, and often it's kind of frustrating. But often the solution is that you probably need to either reduce the number of messages or do more charts because very often a chart that says 10 different things will probably actually say I mean, most people will not get the 10 ideas, they will probably not get none of them, while if the chart has one, two, or three is the very maximum, it will be much easier to get the point. So it's, yeah, it might feel a bit frustrating, but often you need to just reduce the number of messages inside your chart, or I mean, some charts, some very amazing charts have very different many messages, but it's very hard to do when you're doing some static chart. Like for example, on the paper, like your chart will not live on a web page when you can add like interactivity, over effects, all those things. So you need to find a way to define all of the information on a static chart, and it's much harder to do great charts that are static compared to interactive, because when it's interactive, people can just use their mouth to explore the chart, so you can say much more things in an interactive. But in your case, if your chart end up in a paper, yeah, you need to find a way to find out what are the core messages and try to remove as much as possible the noise, even if it's not actual noise, obviously, but just people that could confuse the things that could confuse people. I don't know if that answers your question well.
Thank you. So, and are there any other questions? Okay, so I guess that I've seen that your background is mathematics, and so it's an analytical background.
Yeah.
When you deal with this data, it must be tempting to have a look at the data, what they are actually telling. If there's something else that you can extrapolate, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned that things on sales were going up and unit going down. Why the sales went up when the units went down?
Yeah, your question is how do I give more information about why this is happening, right? Okay, this is, well, how come we are making less units sold, but we are making more money. And it's because mathematically it's possible because we are just selling at a higher price. And then you're like, okay, this might be an interesting information for the product team, for example, because like, okay, that means that maybe people are seeing our product as something of a high quality, more luxury product compared to before. So this is kind of, okay, I'm seeing this specific trend where people are, yeah, there are less people that are buying our product, but they are willing to pay more, and this is a good thing for us. And so this is kind of information that is important for marketing product people, for example. So then you will need to, okay, maybe this chart is interesting for management, but I need to ask other people in the company, like, hey, we see this specific trend inside the data, like this might change how people see the product, and this will matter to many people inside the company. So the main answer to that is, yeah, define your audience and who it matters for. But finding the actual underlying why is kind of also related to ask people that create the product, because in this case I haven't described any kind of product, so it's kind of abstract. But yeah, you need to work with more business people inside your company and ask what they think of this and why they think they could happen, how we can make some tests to see how people see our product, for example.
Okay, thank you. And there is another question. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about
It
that.
was an admin not allowing unmute, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Projecting on the question of Federica and your answer, Joseph, I completely agree with you. But maybe you mentioned it, maybe not. But like, what are the common mistakes that people might make when trying to switch to this approach of design first? Like, for example, based on what you answered now, could, for example, a strict design first approach risk overfitting the narrative before fully understanding the data? Like if I have complex data, maybe I'm trying to do something like what you showed us, but maybe I'm risking here overfitting this narrative. What do you think are the common mistakes that also people might make in this sense? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, and a very good example. Like, some people fall into the trap of spending too much time on the design and trying to have too intense storytelling while it's not necessarily relevant. I haven't talked too much about it because I think most of the time it's the problem is the other way around, but that's definitely something. And since I quickly mentioned it at the end, is you need to know what's inside the data to define the intent and define the design. Like, it's impossible to just design without knowing what the data is about, what are the overall trends. So you definitely need to see the data of some kind, but my point is more to, you shouldn't spend too much energy coding just to see the overview of the data. It's just for you to get info of trends, what your message, what is important to highlight to other people. But yeah, I think what you describe is the main issue is, yeah, trying to just spend too much time on the design and thinking, and just forget about what actually matters is the data, what the data is actually saying. But yeah, I agree. I think Nick has a question.
Yes, please, Nick. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thanks for organizing and thanks for the presentation. My question is more along your previous presentation on types
Yeah.
and Quarto. So maybe I'm just being too reluctant to transition, and I'm coming from heavy use of R Markdown, but I don't see the value in switching to Quarto for myself and types. In your heart of hearts, do you really think it's a better technology? Or what would you tell me if I'm resisting change?
Um, Actually, that's a very good question, and don't. Yeah, I think you shouldn't change it if what you're doing right now is already working super well for you. Like, like maybe there are things that could be better, but if you're already feeling well and you feel like you can do everything you want to do, honestly, you don't have any issue. You don't need to change. I mean, the main thing that I really like about switching to Quarto and types is that it feels more modern. It's hard. It's kind of abstract, I know, but many things that it's much faster. It's more flexible. It feels just better, and it's more a broader topic, but also Quarto supports other languages, not just R. But if you just use R and R Markdown works for you, honestly, I don't think you should switch. I mean, it could be interesting for you to spend some time like, okay, what things that are in Quarto that are not inside R Markdown that may feel okay. I like this feature that, and I don't know how I would do it in R Markdown. But if this never happens to you, honestly, I don't think you should make the change. Like, just choose the tool you feel comfortable with that works for you.
Great. And if but typist is the new, because with both Quarto and R Markdown, I can produce PDFs,
Yeah.
right? So what typist does?
It's kind of similar to LaTeX in a sense that it's just some markup language that will generate PDF. The syntax is very, very different from LaTeX. And I personally, I've used a lot of LaTeX in the past, but now I just prefer types mostly because I find the syntax very, very elegant in the sense that once you start to understand the basic, you really can do any kind of PDF, even the most complex things are very easily doable in types. It's very fast, which is for me a very important argument because if I want to generate 100 reports, I don't want to spend a few minutes or hours just for this. But I mean, LaTeX is still probably the number one tool at the moment for people writing research papers. It works very well. It's very accessible. So yeah, I think they are kind of similar goals, but they serve kind of different purpose. And I mean, in the research world, I think LaTeX is just the number one tool. And in the industry, I don't know honestly.
So when did you set up your company?
Yeah, so I was already a freelancer during college, but I was actually working for my company, like actually creating the company. I would say it's very recent, actually, probably, I don't know, 6, 7 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I guess you foresee some like collaborations with other companies and things.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if there's any, I see someone that just joined us. I don't know if you have any questions because we are closing, but no worries because we are going to post this recording on our YouTube channel, and so we send you an email and advise you about when the recording is ready.
Thank you for having me. It was really cool.
Thank you very much for joining us, for being our speaker, and I look forward to see you on our next events in the future. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us,
Thank you,
and
everyone.
I'll see you soon.